Right, it is 7 o'clock. We are waiting for a couple of more people to join us, both physically and virtually. But given it is 7 o'clock, I will kick off. So welcome to the first meeting of the Genuinely Affordable Homes Scrutiny panel. I'm Councillor Greg Stafford. I'm Vice Chairman of this panel. Councillor Summers, who is the chairman, is on holiday at the moment, so sends his apologies. He is not in North Korea or some other socialist delight. I think he's in Canada, and I wish him a very lovely holiday, and you'll be fortunate that he will be back for the next meeting. I think as it is the first meeting, I would ask all councillors present to just introduce themselves, name, ward, party, very briefly, so that we have that on the record and people who are watching virtually know who we all are. So I've introduced myself, Greg Stafford, Hanger Hill Ward Conservative, and we'll just do it in order. You will need to put the microphone on, otherwise people won't be able to hear.
Hi everyone, I'm Blarina Hashani and I'm the new Labour councillor for North Acton Ward. Thank you.
I am Councillor Ian Kingston, Labour for Northfield Ward.
I am Councillor Gary Pasuto for Southfield Ward, Liberal Democrat.
Barberton Cordier, Labour member, representing Greenford Broadway Ward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Councillor Faduma Mohammed, Labour Party, Southall West.
Hi, I'm Councillor Ben Weston, Labour Pitshanger.
Thank you. And as I said, Councillor Summers has given apologies, and we are waiting for Councillor Baclini from Pitshanger Ward, Labour member for Pitshanger Ward. We are also delighted to have a co-opted member of the committee with us. Co-opted members are fully members of this committee. They can interact, ask questions, raise points, and we encourage them to do so. The only part is if we come to a vote, which is rare in scrutiny, they won't be able to take part. We have with us Miss Alicia Kennedy from Generation Rent, and she's online. Alicia, do you just want to introduce yourself and just a short brief about Generation Rent? That'd be helpful.
Yeah, hi, thank you, and good evening, committee and Councillor Stafford. Thank you for that introduction. I'm Alicia Kennedy, and I'm the director of Generation Rent, and we're a campaign and advocacy organisation who work on behalf of private renters across the UK. And the mission is quite simple. We just want to work with local government, national government, and the governments in Scotland and Wales to ensure that every private renter lives in a safe, secure, and affordable home. Thank you, Councillor Stafford.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving up the time to be part of this panel. I know your contribution will be very useful to us as members, especially giving an outside perspective on what's going on. We do have a whole host of officers as well who are online. I'm not going to ask you all to introduce yourselves now, but before you speak, it would be helpful just to give members and obviously public watching an indication of who you are. But in the room, we do have Harjeet Baines, who is our scrutiny officer. Do you just want to introduce yourself, Harjeet?
Yes, good evening. Harjeet Baines, the scrutiny officer supporting this panel.
Can't stretch out.
And I can see that Councillor Baclini is online as well, so welcome to you. I've mentioned apologies for absence, which was from Councillor Summers. There wasn't a substitution for him, was there? No. Okay. Urgent matters, I don't believe there are any, nor do I believe there are any matters to be considered in private. Are there any declarations of interest from members? No. Okay, then we'll move on to the first substantive item, which is the panel operation. Harjeet, I believe you're going to talk us through this.
So the report includes the panel's terms of reference and the outlined work programme for the year. So the panel is asked to agree its terms of reference and the outlined work programme. The work programme is updated after each meeting and presented at every meeting. Issues such as site visits are included on the work programme, and and panel would be informed of when those take place, so those who take in between panel meetings. So if there's anything that you wish to propose around the meetings, you can do that at the meeting, and then the arrangements can be made around that for that to happen before the following meeting.
Thank you very much, Harjeet. So just we'll take these in order though. So are there any questions or comments on the terms of reference? So can I take it that that is agreed? Lovely. Then the outline work program, as Harjeet said, this is an evolving program, so we can add things to it. So it's not set in stone. This is what's come out of Councillor Summers and my minds alongside Harjeet and officers as well. But if there is anything you think at this point should be included, please do say now. No, excellent. And I take that as those are agreed for the moment. Yep, lovely, thank you. And finally, the co-opted, well, not finally, agree the co-option and external engagement arrangements, which are listed on page 5 of the whole pack, page 3 of 5 of the report. And obviously we've already got a co-opted member, but we have reached out to other organisations as well, some of which have responded and said they just can't give the time. Others we haven't heard from. Those we haven't heard from, we will continue to chase. But if there are other organisations that you feel either should be co-opted members of this panel or should be presenting evidence to the panel in the future, please let us know. But for the moment, are you happy with that proposal? Good. And then finally, approve the agenda items and actions for the next meeting on the 17th of November. I presume, should we do that at the end, Harjeet? Things may come up of this today. So we'll pause that bit and come back to it at the end. Lovely. Okay. Well, then we will move on to the substantive item, which is the Generally Affordable Homes Programme as run by Ealing Council. It's an extensive report, so I thank officers for that. I'm going to ask officers to give a brief overview of the report, and then I'm going to split it up, because it's quite a lengthy report, into sections that we can ask questions and probe a bit more deeply on that. But over to officers to start with for your sort of overview and of the report.
Shall I start? I'll introduce myself, try and get myself on camera. Oops, nearly happened there. So I'm Dave Baptist, Head of Housing Development, and I am responsible primarily for delivering a whole range of affordable housing in the borough, along with colleagues, and also for delivering the council's regeneration scheme. Do you want Phil to introduce himself at this point?
This bit's yours, so you can take it as you wish.
Okay. I take it that everyone's got the report in front of them. As Councillor Stafford has advised, I think this is just an overview, so I don't intend to go through the report page by page, but of course we're happy to pick up any points as they arise throughout the meeting. We always start with such reports giving a context set out by the housing strategy, with overlays from various targets through the London plan, helping us to deliver more and more affordable housing. It's kind of a given that there is more demand than supply, and various studies, most notably our strategic housing market assessment, indicates that we need quite a lot of social housing and market housing to tackle the housing need in the borough. And I don't think that's any particular surprise. The new administration has set some new targets. We had targets over the last administration over a 4-year period, that which were 2,500 genuinely affordable homes in the last period, 2018 to 22. And if I just take a moment to introduce genuinely affordable homes in terms of an ELIN term and a GLA term. In its simplest form, it's low cost rent, and that low cost rent would include council rents, council tenancies. Social rent is kind of an umbrella term. Within that, we currently have a term that's called London affordable rent. These are all traditional rents that people would, the kind of properties and tenancies they would have if they were in housing need and came through the council and were nominated because of their need. They're kind of the net saver. They're the kind of rents that people enter when they first enter social housing. On top of this, there's also, just to confuse matters, there's a new, we call it product, that's probably not a fantastic name, called London Living Rent, which is also based on a low cost rent. It's typically about 60% of the market. That can vary in different places, but it certainly sits between social rents, or that base rent position, as I said, and market rents. And they all serve people who have an income no greater than £60,000, but generally it's driven by housing need. So there's much more social rent than there is London Living Rent, for instance. Principally, the way the council, and these new targets of 4,000 homes are really a stretch, quite a big stretch on the last target of 2,500 homes over a 4-year period. And probably the most useful breakdown is our forecast in the report. I think we sent an addendum to update that because it didn't have all the totals in it. So the forecast in the report shows the breakdown of how we think 4,000 homes could be delivered over a 4-year period. And bear in mind, this is a forecast. Some of it is, well, most of it is to be determined, but some of it is we're more sure of than others. But it's by and large based on past performance. So we've highlighted that we know we're quite confident what's going to be delivered over the next year. And then beyond that, it may tail off in terms of our confidence, and I'll explain a bit more about delivery and who the partners are to deliver this. But we've broken that table down into sort of known schemes over the next year, and then broken down into which are council-led regeneration schemes, which are coming through, if you like, the planning system, what's been delivered in the past in terms of quantum that we would expect to be delivered going forward, and what new opportunities there are to generate more housing. Now, principally, pretty much emphatically, the housing, affordable housing is delivered in 3 ways, really. It's delivered by the private sector through the planning system, what we call Section 106 agreements. So there's a requirement for any development over 10 units to deliver some affordable homes, and then there's a policy overlay that helps that along. So quite a number of homes in the past have been delivered through that planning system. We the majority of affordable homes are delivered through housing associations. There are probably 15 regularly developing housing associations in the borough. That means they routinely build new homes, and there's a reliance on the housing associations to deliver more homes, and that's been the case for many a year. Housing associations deliver the majority of the homes. That's now supported by the council's own programme of delivery. in which we provide nowhere near the cumulative figure of other housing associations, but a substantial amount of housing between the council delivery, including its regeneration schemes, and through its new housing association company, Broadway Living, which is a housing association in its own right. So they're the three principal routes which are probably worth taking note of: the private sector, housing associations, and the council delivery to support affordable homes, genuinely affordable homes. The report goes on in some detail to explain the Broadway Living structure, governance arrangements, and some funding that's attributed to Broadway Living and to the council schemes. So I won't get into that in any detail. And then we are rehearsing why the council set up the company and what benefits that can bring to residents of Ealing. I'm quite quickly moving on to, there's some detail, there's further details. I won't dwell on tables. We've highlighted how our performance over the last 4 years has worked out. I think we delivered 2,576. It's in the report, if memory serves me right. So slightly over the target. We now have, like I said, some fairly stretched targets for the next 4 years. And we are predicting 994 genuinely affordable homes to be delivered by March 23. And by delivered, by and large, we now mean starts on site. I think when the whole program started, we meant started or completed homes. But now, as we've moved on and matured into the program, we generally mean homes that have started on site. And over that 4-year period, obviously the homes that start on site during this year will have been completed by that time. We won't count them twice, but they will all go towards a target. We've got a breakdown of, in broad terms, where those homes were delivered over the past 4 years. We haven't highlighted where they may be delivered in the coming years because we don't know entirely. We work with housing associations, developers. We're not tied into their kind of strategic programs. Many sites they have to buy in any case, and they haven't purchased them already. But we are going by past performance and the environment that we work in with housing associations is that they and the private sector have had a kind of a healthy program of development in Ealing over the recent years, well, over quite a long period of time. I think we've set out to try and break down some of the many terms, give an indication of what rents might be, give an indication of what schemes we know are coming through, which schemes Broadway Living and the council are already working on for at the moment, which are being worked up to be delivered over the next year or so. And we've set out some of the challenges around this. This is by no means an easy task. The council has, in its own self, has probably ramped up its delivery 5-6-fold from what it used to build in the recent past. So in some cases, it might be 10-fold. I think it's worth highlighting some of the challenges. The challenges are many and varied, and they range from where the market is going, higher prices, inflation finding its way through to tender prices, interest rate changes, and changes in funding from the GLA, which will make future funding of schemes through the planning system, the Section 106 schemes, much more difficult because the GLA will no longer fund those schemes unless they deliver over and above what's required in the planning system. So it's making that extremely challenging. It's also making the regeneration schemes, which are the housing regeneration schemes, in short, they're the ones which are quite chunky. They involve demolishing housing estates and re-providing new homes and an environment and a better place in general. And there is a funding change that moves away from funding those regeneration schemes unless they fund the additional homes. So if you have 100 homes, you knock 100 homes down, but build 150, they will only fund the 50 homes. And that's quite a radical change on what we've been working through in the past. So there are a number of challenges. The reliance of the council's building program is mainly on its own land. There are some exceptions to that, but mainly it's on its own land, looking to bring forward opportunities in its own land holdings. Of course, it's the council schemes are funded by the council entirely, including Broadway Living. So there are, the land is not endless, and the low-hanging fruit, if I can put it that way, have been delivered already. So any schemes going forward present its own challenges. I've kind of whizzed through everything. I think there's there's quite a lengthy appendix at the back to try and break down some of these terms. But if I leave it for now, Chair, and pass it back to you to see how you want to proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baptiste. That was very helpful. And thank you again for the report, which is very comprehensive. With members' permission, I intend to split this up really into 4 sections. The first of which is the what one might call the overview of how the council has performed and its targets and proposals for the coming year, which takes us up to section 3. Then there's quite a lengthy section on the background, funding, etc. of Broadway Living, which takes us up to section 12. Then the third part was about what is, in some more detail, what Broadway Living is delivering and is proposing to deliver. And then finally, some of the challenges that Mr. Baptiste has outlined. So if we start then at the sort of overview, I'm going to use Chair's prerogative to ask the first question. In table 1.4, you indicate that the council has exceeded its target. It's 122%, so sort of 22% excess of what has been set out by the sort of target through the GLA. Which is roughly 1,500, give or take, a year, is what the target is. Sometimes it's a bit higher, sometimes it's a bit lower. Whereas in the following table, you assess that we need close to 3,000 homes a year. Can you just explain to me the disparity between those two figures and why the target seems less than what Ealing's own figures suggest we need?
Yes, I don't know if you need my camera on. I can continue speaking like this. The first indication of target is, if you like, what we inherit through the GLA London plan, which have obviously been discussed with central government, and they will at times change periodically. So we work with what we have, and they've been planning targets over the years which have changed. And this is, that first section is all homes to be met by those targets. What we have in the next table, which you outlined, is what's called a strategic housing market assessment. So it's a study that looks at a whole range of inputs around what drives housing need and what measures what ideally would be required to meet all the housing need in the borough. So that second indication of what is needed is is quite high because it's trying to sweep up as best it can all housing need in the borough. And I suppose from my perspective, the emphasis here is it just demonstrates that there's still much more demand than there is supply, which probably goes back to, well, those stretch targets are going in the right direction.
Thank you. I suppose my follow-on question from that is, when you are making strategic decisions about, from a regeneration point of view, about how much housing we should either be building ourselves or encouraging either the private sector or the social rent sector, encourage them to be, what figures are you really, what figures are you using to determine that? How is the policy set? Is it set based on the target, or are you trying to achieve the sort of market assessment?
I think the market assessment is the evidence that supports where policy is going. I think the immediate look is towards those targets which have been set. On a scheme by scheme basis, quite frankly, we're trying to deliver as much housing and affordable housing that is reasonable to do so and can work in a local community and provide the amenities and so forth. So we're not, if you like, driven by an obsession with targets. I think that evidence and those targets find their way through to supporting the basis for the need for housing, and it finds its way through to what we can deliver through planning, and then eventually on the ground in terms of what we can support through funding and what the market can support. So in short, we are working up schemes the best we can to maximize the opportunities that are there, but they are not, the starting point isn't, we have a job. I suppose the background is we always know that we need more housing of all sorts of tenure.
Thank you. Just one more from me. Then 2.6 is the long table that you referenced with the missing figures at the end. The seventh line down, seventh row down. Could you just explain the past performance of RPs 2018 to 22? We're not double counting there, are we? Because if that's stuff that's been done previously, why is it in the table for the coming 4 years?
Yes, I think that's a good point. The intention is not to double count. We are going on. This is why it's sort of coloured in a vague orange colour. There's a degree of uncertainty, but that's based on past performance, the last 4 years, what's been delivered by housing associations, based on the funding programme and in the environment they've been working in. So we've taken that and said that it's not unreasonable to assume that in the next 4 years, the housing association will have the appetite and the opportunities to deliver around about that level of homes. And as I said earlier, or towards the beginning, we are reliant for most of this delivery on housing associations. Sometimes it's a bit of a misnomer when the council says it wants to build 2,500 genuinely affordable homes or 4,000 genuinely affordable homes. It actually means with partners and playing our role as enablers to make that happen, as well as trying to directly deliver ourselves. So we think it's a reasonable assumption to make that past performance could be carried forward. I think in the monitoring over the next year or so, we'll see if that's going to pan out. But it's worth saying that housing is often delivered in surges, and sometimes those surges have a lot to do with the beginning or ends of programs. Like many walks of life, if a scheme is coming to an end, there is often, and it's got an end date, there is often a surge of homes to be built around that time, which we actually expect by March 23, which is the due to the pandemic, the 18 to 22 program was extended by a year. So we have a level of confidence around this figure, but we wouldn't want to, put everything to that mast.
Thank you, Mr. Baptiste. Members, any questions on this first section or comments? Yes, Councillor Cordier.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report is quite comprehensive. Managed to read through, but it's very difficult to digest. Yeah, I'm glad, Chair, that you have raising these questions, and we are discussing these in a partly, as you stated earlier. My question to the officer is on page 23 or 33, report states somewhere that the London Mayor received £4 billion from the central government for the new developments. I am quite interested to know how much grant Ealing has been given by the GLA during the period of 4 years, from 2014 to 2018. And we have managed to deliver 2,500 flats of accommodations. Secondly, and I'm also quite interested to know how much the London Borough of Ealing has borrowed money for these developments. Thank you very much. I might ask more questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cordier. We've jumped slightly, Dave, but please, Mr. Baptiste, so please do answer those questions. Thank you.
Okay, it may be appropriate to bring in other colleagues at some point, but just to take the first point, yes, the GLA have had a certain amount of money from central government in their affordable housing programme. Then, through a competitive bidding process, distribute that. Ealing, I'm just going to make this in broad terms. And I should also caveat that the 2,500 figure is just those genuinely affordable homes. That's not all the affordable homes that are delivered. So we haven't included shared ownership, for instance, which would be quite a major part of that. And that will probably add another, from memory, another 1,500 homes. So, but to answer the question about how much did Ealing receive over the last 4 years, and I stand to be corrected by other colleagues, but it's roughly £100 million. I think it's slightly over that. The initial bid that we put in 2018, there was just shy of £100 million allocation for 1,138 homes, if I remember correctly. That has changed because we rebid, and some schemes happen and some schemes may not have. So I'm kind of rounding off that 100 million funding from the GLA, and we've got a similar amount going forward for the next 4 years. And that is not all to deliver genuinely affordable homes, because like I mentioned, some of this will be for shared ownership, but the large majority, probably 80%, would be to build out social rent or London affordable rent, the kind of low cost rent product which we work with. I don't know if you want to take it at this point, how much money has Ealing funded? I think we've got colleagues on the call to help with that, in part at least.
Yeah, happy to take that answer if you've got it in front of you now.
I'll probably, it's in the report, and I'm going to have to scurry along to find it, unless Faraz is there to bail me out.
Dave, I'm just going to chip in. It's Philip Brown speaking. I'm the Director of Development for Councillor colleagues. The report has a section on funding of the programme. It's section 6. And in that section, it's page 26 of the whole report, page 8 of the submitted report in terms of it being a part of the whole report. And in section 6, the council has agreed a total package of lending. I'm sorry, my video doesn't seem to be working. I'm trying to make it work, but it's not coming on, unfortunately. The council's agreed a total funding package of up to 400 million for the Broadway Living business plan, which was agreed by Cabinet and Council in November and December 2020. And that was to fund 1,500 homes in total. And subsequently, Broadway Living brought forward the first tranche of those schemes and secured 102 or so million, 103 million of council lending out of that 400 million pot for the tranche 1 schemes. And we've recently agreed the tranche 2 schemes, which are also a part of the business plan. And the tranche 2 lending, I believe, was 212 million. Those figures are not in the report specifically, but I'm getting these from elsewhere. In addition, the council has agreed a budget of 36 million capital spend to bring forward schemes to a point to which they can be transferred to the LRP. And on transfer, that capital spend is repaid to the council. So just in terms of that detail, you can find that in section 6 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope that's answered your questions, Councillor Corder. Thank you. So just returning then to sections 1 and 2 of our report. Any other questions on that? Yes, Councillor Hashani.
Thank you. And I agree, it's a really comprehensive report and it's fantastic. And then as a new councillor, I'm still trying to understand all the functions and mechanisms. And so this is really great. I just wanted to ask, on page 14, you say areas of delivery. Can you specify which at this time? I do see that there is another table on 14.7 that says some of them can't be identified yet, but can we identify them yet?
Sorry.
And then I do have another couple of quick questions I can ask after.
Let's get that one answered if possible first.
Yeah. Did you say page 14?
Correct, yes.
Right.
So section 11.6, it says the map below indicates the areas that GAH is forecast in Ealing.
Yes, sorry, I was on a different page. Yes, this map is, I think I said a different point earlier actually. I thought it was what we had delivered. This map is forecasting of the known schemes of the schemes that we're aware of, where they might be in the borough. So this will be the slightly over 900 homes, well actually almost 1,000 homes that we're expecting to be delivered in the next year, broken down to give an indication of where in the borough they would likely to be delivered. I'm afraid the map is not fantastic. It's quite small, but we could certainly amplify that if that was needed. Do you want more detail on where those homes are?
If we can include that in more further information later on, that'd be great.
Yeah, if we could, Mr. Baptiste, that'd be very helpful. Councillor Shan, you had some other questions.
My second question is around the introduction of the social rent. Now, as I say, I'm quite new to this, so the distinction between the London affordable rent and this, I'll have to dig a bit deeper in, but it's helpful to see that the social rent in Ealing is lower than the London affordable rent, which is good news. And I just want to see if you have made any assessments on the impact of this on affordability for the schemes, but also looking forward, is there any risk that some of these rents will change? And I'm thinking go up, especially with the increases in inflation and such, or are they set for a period of time?
Okay. I'll try and get my camera on again. Oh, we've got Faraz. Are you jumping in there, Faraz?
Yeah, hi, I can help here. Sorry, I can't.
Yes. Please go ahead, Mr. Ali Sheikh.
I think he might be having a little difficulty with his microphone. Shall I start for now? And then if a colleague is able to join, and I'll say what I know.
Can you?
Yes, we can hear you now, Mr. Sheikh. Oh no, now we can't.
No. Well, I'll finish my point, and then it may give some time to work through some technical points. So social rent is almost like it's a rekindle term. It's kind of come back as a generic term, and now as a sort of a product. Again, excuse me for calling it a product. So social rent is kind of well understood. Pretty much the lowest rents in the borough, the lowest rents in Ealing are council rents, and social rents are now deemed to be close to that. London affordable rent was, if you like, a product of its time. It's no longer going to be funded going forward, but we are in a pipeline stage where those rents will still, those homes will still be produced at that rent. Both social rent and London affordable rent are well within the kind of affordability threshold that we work with for people who are in housing need. And as I said earlier, there's a maximum income of £60,000. Of course, most people in housing need earn nowhere near that. But those rents are kind of translated to mean that people can afford to rent in social housing, in affordable housing, or they get state support, whether it's universal credit or housing benefit, to enable them to do so. So we don't necessarily routinely do affordability checks except at the upper end, in the sense that people either qualify or they don't. It's driven by housing need by and large. If I stop there with my answer, I don't know if Faraz has anything more to add.
I think we're still having technological problems. Yep. Okay. I think Councillor Shani, that we can get you some more detail after the meeting or later on if we can get that technology to work. But you've got one more question, I think. Great, thank you. We seem to have stumbled into the next section, but any questions up to section 12 of the report, up to but not including 12 of the report from other councillors? No, I've got one final one then, just on the funding, and just for clarity. So you said that we got 100 million roughly from the GLA to produce around, I think you said 1,100 units. Then you said that Broadway Living had been given 400 million to produce 1,500 units. So why, based on that, it seems to suggest that it costs far more for us to build them with our money than it does from the GLA money. Can you just explain that disparity?
Yes, Councillor Stafford, it's Philip Brown again, and apologies again, I don't seem to be able to make my camera work, but the numbers in the report refers to essentially different things. The GLA funding is capital grant from the GLA, and we have in total 250 million for both Ealing and Broadway Living across the two programmes, which is 2018 to 2023 and 2021 to 2026. And so I think that's in paragraph 11.5 of the report. But the money that, the 400 million you referred to, which is the money supporting Broadway Living, that is lending from the council. So it's loans rather than grants, and it is paid back by Broadway Living over the 50-year cash flow of its business plan. So the GLA grant is capital grant, not paid back, and the 400 million is lending. Effectively, the lending plugs the gap between the grant and the rest of the costs of the scheme, because the grant in itself is not enough. It typically amounts to about 30% of the total cost to build a home, and then the lending is the gap required to fund the rest of the cost. I hope that makes sense to explain the difference.
It does, absolutely. That's very helpful. Thank you. Members are not indicating any other questions in sections 1 to 11. So then if we move on to section 12 and beyond, which is essentially around what is planned, what is going to be completed, what was completed in the last financial year, and what is planned to be completed this financial year and onwards. Obviously talking specifically about the two tranches and some of the schemes. Do members have any questions on any of that? I'm not seeing any. So no, that's fine. So in which case, let's move on to the sort of the challenges for delivery, which was a shortest section, but obviously the bit that perhaps should concern the council and members the most. I suppose one thing that wasn't in that for me was around, I suppose, the inevitable tension between the need to build homes and the desire, especially amongst residents, that they're not having inappropriate developments built on their doorstep, that we're not using metropolitan open space for building tower blocks. How is the council, and we've seen, for example, with the Gurnell development, where the planning committee rejected a very large proposal on that site because it didn't feel it was appropriate on metropolitan open land. How are we going to be dealing with that tension? Sort of one might, with a small p, political tension, and how does the council intend to get over that problem?
Do you want me to start, Phil, and then?
I was going to actually, the answer to this comes in two parts, and I think the first part is how land is selected for affordable housing development, and I think we could ask Jessica Tamayo to answer to that point, and then it goes to the commissioning of Broadway Living to deliver the housing on those sites, and I could ask Jamie Burns to comment on that. And then it's the progression of those schemes through planning. And each of these points answers part of that question. And I would ask Andy Berridge to answer the third part. So if we could start first with Jessica Tamayo, please, and then Jamie Burns to address those first 2 points.
Hello, good evening.
You're very faint, Jessica. If you could try and speak a little louder or come closer to your mic.
Hello, is this any better?
Not amazingly so in here. I think we'll cope, but if you could be as loud as possible, that'd be great.
I will try to be a little louder.
That's much better.
My name is Jessica Tamio. I'm the AD for Strategic Property and Investment for the council. Around how we select sites for development, there was a council-wide review in 2018 of a number of sites, mainly general fund assets, where we identified a number of sites that were suitable for a change of use, for a variety of changes of use. And we have 4 sites currently disposed of to Broadway Living, and a number more in Broadway Living's future pipeline of development that have been identified as suitable for housing delivery. And the way that we look at sites, if they come to us now, we have an assets board, and we are we take a site and look at a number of options appraisals, because we have to look corporately across the objectives of the council for site suitability, whether that's development for housing or development for another purpose that the council might choose.
Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Good evening.
We can, loud and clear.
Hi, I'm also having a, oh, there we go, I think. I'm the new housing commissioner for Ealing. It's a new post, and there's a couple of points I wanted to make. The first is that we're currently working on a new housing strategy, and that will be quite comprehensive. And as part of that, we'll be taking a very close look on what we're commissioning, and looking at the regeneration opportunities and the wider social values that we can bring in terms of developments. So that's an exciting piece of work that that we're looking to, as I say, we're consulting at the moment, and we'll be bringing forth a housing strategy for review. And in terms of, we're also looking at, in terms of quite specifically, what we're looking to achieve, and we'll work that up into a new commissioning document that we're working on, and that will go hand in hand with the housing strategy. And then in terms of what we're building, we have things like the Broadway Living Design Guide. So we're taking a very close look at things at the moment to make sure that we're getting the right housing in the right places that we need, and as I say, and how that fits in with the wider social community value.
And sorry, just to jump in there, when do you think that strategy will be published, or a cabinet, I assume?
Yes, I think we're looking towards the latter part of the year. It's important for us to get it right. So we're looking November, December, but I think it's important that we've got high hopes for this, and it's important that we get it right, but it is towards the end of the year, November, December.
Thank you. It might be something that this panel might want to look at in its December or
that'd be great.
Meeting, if possible. Not December, sorry, January meeting, if possible. I forget who was going to come next, Mr. Baptiste.
It's Andy Berridge. If he could talk about how we bring sites forward once we've selected them and had the commission from the council, how Broadway Living takes those sites through planning.
Apologies, I don't think the camera is working. Andy Berridge, Head of Construction, responsible for delivery of affordable housing schemes on site. And once we have approval of the schemes from Cabinet and by BLRP board, we go through a procurement process to competitively select a contractor to deliver the scheme on site. We use a number of frameworks to achieve that, which have already been established, and have pre-vetted the contractors that we select to tender for the schemes. And once we've selected the contractor, we then work through a series of discussions with the contractor and the consultants that we appoint to fine-tune the tender price before we instruct the contractor to deliver the scheme to site. And then we've got a team of consultants and officers that oversee the delivery of the schemes on site through to practical completion.
Thank you very much. Anything to add, anything to round that off, Mr. Brown?
I think that's most of the answer. I think what we didn't cover there is the tension between getting the right scheme in planning terms and the local consultation. So unfortunately, we aren't able to have our head of new business in the meeting this evening. He has written part of the report addressing this, but essentially we work very closely with our planning colleagues, but at arm's length in terms of making formal planning applications. We will have a pre-planning consultation meeting with planners to discuss the proposals. We will then have consultation meetings, a series of consultation meetings with local residents, those affected by the planning application, and with ward councillors to understand views. And we will then adapt the proposals to reflect views expressed in those consultation meetings. And this process is iterative, and it leads to finally a detailed planning application being made, which we would hope that following consultation will be the most acceptable, both in terms of addressing the local community's concerns, but also remaining viable for delivery for Broadway Living. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I think it goes to a question that I will probably ask at the next meeting when we're talking to partners, is how robust really that Chinese wall, for want of a better phrase, is between the regeneration element of the council and the planning element, so that the influence of one is not being pushed on the other. You know, because clearly there are different priorities, or there should be different priorities for those two elements. So I give you forewarning that I'm going to want to delve a bit closer into that next time. Members, any other questions? Yes, Councillor Busuttil, and then Councillor Kingston.
Thank you, Chair. With the rise in the construction costs, as some said to me recently, is going through the roof. How is this going to severely impact in this council achieving its 4,000 homes over the next 4 years?
I could take that one. It's Philip Brown again. Let me see if I can get my camera to work.
Your camera is on, so we can see you.
There we go. There is a substantial rise in construction costs. We've had estimates ranging from 7% for this year up to 18% for this year, so a wide range. What we've done is we have regularly updated our business model for Broadway Living and for the regeneration schemes the council is continuing to undertake. And we've updated those business models with the latest estimates from cost consultants. And we are at the moment receiving tenders back on 3 projects, Lexton Road, Sussex Crescent and Northolt Grange. And it appears from the initial tender returns that our estimates are fairly accurate. So, I mean, that's one piece of good news, but I think the general issue, the general pressure we face is that with rising construction costs, there is greater and greater tension on the viability of proposals, and we will need to what we would call value engineer, which is a term which is used to really mean seeking to find savings in the delivery of projects in order to make schemes viable again. And it's very difficult to say what this will mean for the 4,000 home target, because although construction costs are rising now, there's no indication that they will continue to rise, and supply and demand dynamics in the market will generally tend to smooth out these construction cost increases, because as construction costs go up, then projects stall because they're not viable, and as projects stall, then contractors become more willing to bid for work because their order books get less full. So there is a mechanism in the market which can adjust prices in a downward way. So although prices are rising rapidly now, we don't know they will carry on rising rapidly, and so we might reach a place where they become more competitive again. But with everything else going on, with inflation being very high and interest rates being high, building costs rising is only one of the challenges we face. And I think just being realistic about where we are now, if the situation doesn't change and construction costs rise and inflation carries on rising, and we have high interest rates for the next 3 or 4 years, then there'll be a real challenge on delivering the 4,000 home target, because viability just won't be there with the grant available from the GLA or other sources. And we would then need to find significant additional cross subsidy from council sources, council resources, to maintain delivery. And if you look at the table, which we referred to earlier in the meeting, which I believe is in section 1, which has the breakdown of the 4,000, actually a lot of that 4,000 isn't delivered by the council directly and isn't delivered by Broadway Living. It is delivered by other parties, other organisations delivering homes in the borough. And it's just not possible to understand what those parties will do, what those other organisations will do in the coming climate, because we would rely on a steady stream of applications for major planning sites, and we don't know what that application stream looks like at this stage. We only forecast it might be good based on historic experience, and with a very significant change in the operating environment for everybody, then of course our forecast might not be right.
Councillor Kingston.
Yes, Councillor Siddle's covered most of my points, but I just want to know, are there less contractors going for the positions? Obviously, if raw materials are more expensive, they'll probably go for more lucrative projects. So I know in my own ward, Northfield, Orion Park seems to have been put on hold because of expense. I don't know if you can comment on that a bit more.
Andy, you have more hands-on experience of the tenders coming back and what the real on-the-ground situation is for contractors right now. Do you want to answer that point?
Yeah, by all means. The audio is quite bad, unfortunately. I think I got the gist of the question. Tender returns at the moment have increased quite significantly. The prices have probably increased between 10 and 15% at the moment, and largely down to material cost increases and labor cost increases. We anticipate that will continue certainly for the rest of this current year. And it may well level out next year, but it's a difficult situation to try and predict currently. The other issue that we're facing at the moment is that a number of contractors are unwilling to do single stage tendering, much preferring a two-stage process where you select a single contractor and then negotiate the price, having competitively selected them for the first stage of the tender process. And what we're finding also is that contractors are also stipulating that they won't provide a fixed price contract figure on their tender returns, and they are mostly now caveating their tender returns with an inflationary requirement during the build period whilst it's on site. And clearly for the larger schemes, so circa 200 unit schemes, which are delivered over 2-3 year period, that figure can be quite substantial, and it's probably a movable feast at the moment. We're working through, it's new to us, so we're working through it with contractors at the moment, but they're not capping that cost increase currently, which is difficult to for us to then try and predict the financial outcomes of the scheme.
Super, thank you very much. Any other questions, members? Yes, Councillor Mohammed.
Yeah, this is just a general question. When you are sending out your tendering, do you consider the makeup of families within the borough in terms of the size to contractors what they ought to build? Because in particular, Southall, families are quite large, and 1 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms properties, it's not feasible for families that consist of 6 or 8 members. Is this a factor considered when you are specifying the tenders for contractors, what they should be building?
That's actually an issue that's considered prior to the formal planning application. So as Philip has alluded to previously, there's a lot of consultation that we do with local communities and the planners in order to try and agree the tenure and scheme mix for projects. And that's very much an important part of what we try and agree early on in the process, and with the support of the planning team.
Yes, so you can follow up, Councillor Mohammed.
Yeah, just a supplementary. Thank you for the feedback. But do you also consider the waiting lists that the council have in terms of the families or individuals waiting? Because there's over 11,000 people waiting on a waiting list. Is that to be considered? It's all great to consult with the communities, but do you actually look at the data within the council that actually shows on a waiting list?
Can I just cut in and pick this one up, please? The way this works is we have a housing strategy which informs what the local plan requires to be built, and the housing strategy and the local plan are informed by the strategic housing needs assessment, which is done as part of the evidence base for the local plan. And that is about to be done again. So certainly what happens is a very thorough understanding of the housing needs is captured in the strategic housing needs assessment, and that informs what the local planning authority agrees as the required mix in its housing strategy and in its planning documentation. So for instance, the local plan will say the needs are 2 beds and 3 beds and a mix of social rent versus shared ownership. I'm not giving you the exact numbers, it's just an example, but that's the process that housing need is, that's the governance around housing need being factored into planning decisions. So when a planning application is made by Broadway Living, by the council for its own regeneration projects, or by external parties bidding for land and making planning applications on that land, then they have to have regard to the local plan, and the local plan requires certain mixes and 10 years of affordable housing to be built, and that is informed by, as I explained, the feeding in of the housing needs through the governance processes I've set out.
Thank you, Councillor Shani.
Thank you. And just going back to the point about viability, I think some of the pressures are very, very big at the moment, and hopefully they will level out. But I've heard from the doorstep and speaking to residents that, some developers are using this now as an excuse to add 1 or 2 or 3 floors to a building that's already quite high. And I'm talking about the private developers who would provide some of the affordable housing within their development. I just wanted to ask, how can we reassure our residents that we are managing these conflicting challenges and that actually we have a robust process in place that ensures, that they can't out negotiate us in this, time that's worrying for everybody, really. Thank you.
Should I step in and take this one, Councillor Stafford?
Yes, please.
I feel this is slightly outside the scope of the report because this is a question really around the application of the planning policy in the borough, which is slightly outside the scope of the genuinely affordable housing brief. However, I can comment somewhat on this. When a developer makes a planning application, it obviously needs to conform to the local plan, and there will be discussions with planning officers before the application comes to committee around whether it is felt that developers have properly complied with the local plan. And certainly officers' recommendations to planning committee will be around whether the applications do or don't comply. In terms of adding height and density, etc., into planning applications, all of that process, all of that, the density and the height and the other aspects of the planning application are considered as part of the planning process, and planning officers will consider applications and then make recommendations to the planning committee, which will either agree to grant resolution to planning or not, based on its own view, supported by the officer's recommendations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown, for that. I think it in some ways touches on the question I asked you. I think perhaps it might be helpful for our next meeting if we had someone from the planning department here as well, who might be able to answer some of those questions. Any other questions from members? Yes, sorry, Councillor Wesson.
Thanks very much for the report and also for the responses to questions, really helpful. My question is specifically in relation to the housing strategy, and it might be slightly premature given that I think we'll probably move on to that at a future scrutiny meeting, but we know that home ownership in particular is a remote dream for many young people in the borough. And I'm aware that some councils, certainly aware of one in Warwickshire, that's putting in place measures, preferential measures, shared ownership schemes that are particularly ring-fenced for young people in particular localities, and just wondered whether that was something that we might look to explore here as part of the housing strategy.
Could I ask? I was going to ask Dave Baptiste to pick that up because he actually is more involved in the housing strategy coming forward.
Yes, I mean, I think as a specific, I think the important point that you raised is about affordability, and yes, those multiples of incomes versus value are quite scary. It is very difficult for people to purchase homes in the borough. Sometimes it's parts of the borough which are more challenging than others. We don't have a specific scheme to ring fence shared ownership to a particular group of people, for instance. The starting point with shared ownership is that they are targeted towards local people in any case, and that can move to other people who are outside the borough if the take-up isn't there. It doesn't necessarily deal with the affordability point, but like I said, I mean, to give you a practical example, shared ownership in Northolt is much more affordable than shared ownership in the east of Borough, certainly in central Ealing. So affordability does vary. Shared ownership has been pretty popular. It's had its ups and downs in the press, but it's been pretty popular. And even now, in terms of its take-up. And we're coming to the end of a program that the government has sponsored called Help to Buy, which is, if you like, a challenge to shared ownership, being a big subsidy from central government to help people into home ownership. And shared ownership kind of buyers with that for in terms of competition. But your fundamental point about affordability, I think we continue to look at that. We are intending to bring forward what we're calling an intermediate housing policy, which will look at all tenures which are not low cost rent. So that will look at London living rent, for instance, or an intermediate rent. It will look at shared ownership, and it will look to see if there's anything we can do to sponsor that form of entrance into home ownership or intermediate housing. Hope that answers somewhat the point.
Yes, I'm getting nods in the room. Next, and many apologies, Ms. Kennedy. The screen that I can see people's hands on is on the opposite side of the chamber from me, and now I'm approaching 40. I can't really see it. So I'm sorry if you've had your hand up for ages, but do go ahead, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Councillor Stafford. And no, I haven't had it up for ages, so you're perfectly fine. I just wanted to go back to something that Mr. Brown said about there's a new Ealing draft social housing market assessment due. So when is that due? Because I noticed that, you know, though it's obviously 56% affordable, the dwelling need sets out that 39% of that should be from social rent. And of the homes that have been built this year, it doesn't look like that percentage has been reached. And similarly, of the 4,000 that you're planning to build, it similarly doesn't look like that percentage will be reached. And I just wanted to just see when the new assessment will be out. And is that because, you know, you don't feel that either you've got the grant or the challenges are too great that percentage will ever be reached for social rent? So I just wanted to just get a sense of, you know, how you monitored that going forward. And is that an aspirational percentage? And then when you get the new draft assessment, things may change, or as you develop over 4 years, you'll keep that percentage in mind and work towards the draft plan.
So the strategic housing needs assessment should be being updated now as part of the housing strategy and the local plan being refreshed. And so when the local plan progresses through its adoption stages, then it will become the policy against which planning applications are judged. And the strategic housing needs assessment will feed in to the decisions by the planning authorities what percentages to include for various tenures and for various proportions. And monitoring of that is done on an annual basis. There's an annual monitoring report published by the local authority, by the local planning authority, as to what's been achieved against the local plan targets. Affordable living is only part of the delivery because, of course, we make up a proportion of what's delivered across the borough. And the aspiration of the council, the planning authority, is that it will achieve 50% affordable housing overall of all housing delivered. And the mechanisms it has are through the local plan, and each scheme being encouraged, each individual private scheme that comes forward being encouraged to achieve at least 35% affordable housing. And then there are 100% affordable housing schemes delivered by housing associations. So when you add all this up together, the aspiration is that 50% of all housing developed as affordable housing, and it's monitored on an annual basis. But the council doesn't have a lever to pull which ensures that 50% is achieved, because it's not in control of all planning applications, in the sense that it isn't the applicant and it isn't the landowner, and it has to negotiate the amount of affordable housing on a scheme by scheme basis. Of course, where it is in control, it can bring forward the affordable housing it wants to see. So there's a combination of things in play which leads to the delivery of the affordable housing percentage across the borough over the local plan period. I hope that goes some ways to answering your question.
Ms. Kennedy, do you want to come back on that?
No, I suppose, thank you for that, Mr. Brown, and that does. I suppose then, in terms of, should you not therefore, within the 4,000, be striving to reach the 39% social rent? Or is that not the way that you see the system working?
The 4,000 is genuinely affordable by Ealing's definition. Ealing's definition is that you need to have a housing cost which is no more than a third of the local household income in the locality of the application. I believe it's on a ward by ward basis. It doesn't include any shared ownership at all. And since all affordable housing being delivered in the new plan will be social rent or council rent, then everything that's delivered, which is rented, will meet that definition and will be much more affordable than the current London affordable rent homes that are delivered in the 2018 to 23 programme. So I think there is a good chance that the majority of the homes in the new programme will be more affordable than the homes in the 2,500 that were delivered in the 18-22 administration, because there is this switch to social rent in the new funding regime.
Thank you, Councillor Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Can I just clarify that then? So, for example, the proposed development on the Percival House site, so obviously the land's owned by the council. There will be a planning application at some point for the well, it's gone through, but forgive me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember that being 50% plus social, generally affordable housing. Why have we not insisted on land that we own and have control over, that we are, why have we not insisted upon that? And I suppose that goes for any other scheme where the council owns the land.
I don't feel I can fully answer that question because I wasn't involved in detail in the project team that brought forward the application, nor was I part of the planning team that, planning officer team that negotiated the affordable housing split. And I understand that the application itself was heard in March last year. Yeah. Just before this was March last year, and during and there were quite a lot of detailed negotiations leading up to the planning application, and it's not a Section 106 in itself because it's an application by the council on council land. So there is what's called a memorandum of undertaking, where the council sets out the planning authority what it will deliver, and there was a complex set of negotiations balancing the council's aspirations for delivery of the site and what it wants to achieve on the site with delivery of affordable housing and meeting the local plan requirements. And so we would need to get officers who are much more close to the detail of that to come and answer questions on person.
Yeah, I suppose I wasn't really, well, I was asking, I used it as an example, but really it's more the general point that is, surely if the council has the aspiration to have a 50% genuine, affordable homes across the borough on all applications, that it should be on land that it owns itself. I find surprising that it's not trying to achieve that or more in order to keep the overall average up. I accept you might not be able to answer that now, but I think we do need to understand why the council isn't doing that if it's not doing that.
I can add to that, if I may, Chair.
Please do, Mr. Baptist.
Because I attended the planning committee over 3 separate times until Percival House was given planning permission. And the short answer is Percival House is a 50% affordable housing scheme, as we strive to do on all of our public land. But the split thereafter is, so it's an affordable envelope, 50%, and roughly about a third of that is in new money social rent, in old money London affordable rent, and we've got grant funding to support that. And the remainder of the affordable housing is what we're calling a discount market rent, so less than market. So it's in that intermediate bracket. So overall, we are delivering, or the intention, certainly from the planning perspective, is to deliver 50% affordable housing. And you're right that the council should do that on all its sites. And then it's getting closer to what Ms. Kennedy had indicated, that we should be striving to deliver of the affordable housing quite a decent proportion of social rent under an affordable rent.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Any other questions from anyone or comments? Squinting at the screen. I can't see any hands up there either. Okay, well, thank you all very much, council officers, for your report and for answering the questions in some detail. I suppose we've got some things that have come out of this. I think, one, we said we wanted a planning officer to attend the next meeting as part of our discussions with the social the sort of partner sector. We wanted to see the housing strategy at the meeting as soon as it's published, which I would guess if it's published in December at our January meeting. I think also, given what you've said about the slightly turbulent nature of inflation, interest rates, building costs, etc., it would be useful to have an update if there are any significant delays to the programme this year, or that you haven't outlined in this report. Just so that we can keep an watching brief on that. I assume such reports go to the Housing Cabinet anyway, so hopefully that wouldn't be too onerous on you to just make sure this committee can see them. And finally, really, I think this is a two-way process. Obviously, we're scrutinising what you're doing, and obviously you report through to the Cabinet member, but this committee is a cross-party committee. So if there's anything you feel that we as councillors should know or can help with, or using either our auspices as councillors or anything else that we do in our outside lives, please do feel free to contact via Harjeet if there's anything you feel that this committee should know about, or you think that we can help with going forward. So I just put that out there. Members, is there anything I've missed or anything else that you think we should be putting forward here? Yes, Councillor Kingston.
I think maybe we should also look at what's sort of going forward. Obviously, it's 4 months away into our next meeting. So again, it would be interesting to find out. They did sort of allude, sort of like raw materials, cost of labour might sort of plateau, but was that really the case? I'd be quite interested to know, in sort of the short term to medium term.
Thank you. Yes, hopefully you caught that, officers. Essentially an update on any of the changes to building costs, inflation, and anything that you think is going to have a positive or negative impact on the programme. We probably don't necessarily, if nothing has changed, we probably don't need a formal report. It can just be a note, I think. But if obviously something significant has changed, then we would welcome a fuller report. Anything else, Harjeet, that you captured that I haven't picked up on? Lovely. Well, once again, thank you very much, officers, for that. That was really helpful. I think, given what we've just said, that covers our last point that we were holding back from the previous report on the work programme. But is there anything else that members want to see on the work programme going forward, having had this discussion this evening? No. Clearly, if anything comes to you during your sleeping or waking hours over the next 4 months, please make sure you feed them into Harjeet, Councillor Summers and myself. Just give the opportunity for anyone who's virtually at home, Councillor Cleany, Ms Kennedy, anything you want to add? No, I don't think so. I can't see any hands again. Well, again, thank you, Ms Kennedy, for joining us. Hopefully we will see you in the flesh at some point as well. And obviously your contribution and questions are most appreciated. I don't think there's anything else. No, so the date of the next meeting is as in the papers, which is the 17th of November later this year. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.